Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Well, thank you, Tony, for coming on such a cold week.
Yeah, I'm trying to warm up. I'm seriously. Man, you guys rolled out the white carpet. Thanks.
So actually, just today I realized something funny. Besides what Kav and I share with you, besides being in the same industry and having the same hairstyle, is that, yeah, is that you have roots in Michigan, where he grew up, and in Lebanon, where I'm originally from.
Exactly.
So I'd like to bring us back maybe to your upbringing. I know you attribute a lot to your builder capabilities and skills to your grandfather, but there's probably a lot of things that happened in your childhood that made you the inventor and builder and founder we know today.
Well, a bunch. Yes, my grandfather, he put tools in my hand at 4, drills and, electricity and all those things that drive my grandmother and my mom crazy. But that's how I first got, hands-on on things and build, just like you guys are all building here. And probably a lot of you, did the same thing when you were younger. But really, for me, what happened was there was 2 things. One is we were moving all the time. So I went to 12 schools in 15 years until I ended up at the University of Michigan, where I stayed. And through all that moving, the only thing that it could come with me are the tools, like more or less, because you didn't have the internet, you didn't have any of that stuff. So I would bring my tools first and build stuff, but then it became my Apple II. And then that was the next tool, and through that I had a 300 baud modem and BBSs and all that stuff to stay connected with the other geeks that I just left at wherever I was. And so, and through that was my way of dealing with moving so often, was that this was my own world that I could create and work with and build. And that was how it all started. And then there were more people like me. That was Revenge of the Nerds days, where all the tech geeks were not cool. And, we would just hang out, and we started a company in Detroit in 11th grade, and then sold that later. And then I started 2 at University of Michigan and sold one of those, and then ended up in Silicon Valley.
I guess also you mentioned tools, but also prior to tools, there's culture and mindset. Just the idea of building is probably even more ingrained in you than just the tools. The tools were basically something you took with you.
Yeah, it was literally, my grandfather told me, he said, you see this entire world out there. This was all created by humans, just like you. And if they can do it, you can do it too. So just, use your skills, use your talents, learn, be open, and just start building stuff. And that's really what it was. And so I didn't know anything else from a kid. I was just like, you build, build, build. And all these other people were like, what are you doing? Build, build, and it was just so much fun. And I do it even to this day, and I can't get enough of it. It's, it's a fun disease to have.
Speaking of teaching kids, shout out to Mitch Resnick up there from the Lifelong Kindergarten and inventor of Scratch, which, if you think about it, Scratch is kind of like the godfather of vibe coding in a way. Maybe he won't like it or won't like it. But thank you, Mitch.
Thank you, Mitch. Thanks for being here.
One thing I heard on a podcast which made me laugh, not because you did it, but because I did the same thing. When I first interviewed for my first job as a founding engineer in a company, I also showed up in a suit. And I heard that you did the same thing at General Magic.
Absolutely. And there are 2 people in the audience who were there at General Magic when I went and interviewed. I had a jacket and a tie straight out of the Midwest, and they sat me down in front of the arcade game and, the stand-up arcade game in Silicon Valley, and put me on the floor, took off my tie, took off my jacket, and said, okay, now the interview can begin. I was like, whoa, I'm not in Kansas anymore,
That's awesome. Well, at General Magic, one of the things I think about is, what Mike Tyson says is, you have a plan until you get punched in the face, right? Everyone got that.
Absolutely.
I think that was kind of your first punch after you took the suit off.
That was my first big punch on a major scale. I had other ones, like I did this processor for the Apple II. So got a friend and I reverse engineered the Apple II 6502 and created a 65816 processor over a summer and sold it to Apple. And what happened was we only sold, like 20 parts because I didn't understand that like there are markets and the Apple II's dying and you need to have customers. So I got punched in the face there after working really, really hard because I was like, I make this really cool thing and it works really well. Oh, there's nobody who wants to buy it. I'm like, duh, okay, each stage of my career, we're always getting punched in the face to learn, to then, to put that in, to finally, after probably, I'd say, 15 years of trial and error, to finally have my first real success.
Maybe from General Magic, then, what are some of the learnings that you think are applicable still today?
Oh, it's all there. Well, first of all, it's in my book, Build. So put a lot of it in there.
This is awesome, by the way. If you have copies, can we get us?
Yeah, we have copies.
Yeah,
At least can get you all hooked up with copies.
Yeah.
The first thing is you got to really understand the problem you're solving, right? And the why. The why. What problem are you really solving? Why does it matter? And a lot of times when you grow through the engineering disciplines, you start seeing things and you go, oh, look at that cool thing, look at that thing, and you put it together and you go, isn't that cool? And it's all about the what, but it's not a lot about the why. And I had the same problem, coming through school. I would just put all these basic weird Lego blocks together and go, isn't that cool? And people would go, oh yeah, I guess so. But they didn't resonate. But when there was another engineer next to me, they go, oh yeah, that's cool. And so at General Magic, what we were doing was we had this huge sandbox. We had the creators of the Macintosh with us. And we had too much money, kind of like a lot of AI companies today. And we were creating this thing that we just thought was really cool. But we didn't know why we were creating it. And it turned out to be the iPhone 15 years too early. That's what we were creating, but we didn't know it. We were just like doing stuff that was cool. But whenever we showed anyone, they were like, yeah, but why do I need it? What are you solving for me? And the pains that we were solving at General Magic was we were doing email, and almost nobody had email in 1991, 92, unless you were a really big corporation. And even then, it was email inside a corporation for the most part. We were solving downloadable games. We were solving e-travel, so you could book travel. This was in 91, 92, 93, before the internet. We were doing emojis. We were doing just incredible things that the world, and it was in a portable form factor. And there was no even Wi-Fi, there was no digital or any kind of data networks. There were none of these things. We were building all this stuff, and it was like, this is really cool. And nobody, literally, we sold a couple thousand of them to the friends who were geeks with us in Silicon Valley, and that was all that bought it. We spent $400 to $500 million in 1992, 93. And it was the huge disaster. And it was because we were making stuff that was great for other geeks. And that was it. And that's when you get punched in the face. And I was like, what are we doing? We spent day and night for 4 years building this thing. And it was and the whole world said it was going to be the biggest thing. That was the press said. We were going to kill Microsoft. And it just tanked. And then the internet took over, just literally a year later. So the big thing there was, we had incredible ideas, but we didn't know why we were building it. We didn't know who we were building it for. We didn't even have the technology ready yet to be able to realize the dreams we had for problems we didn't even have yet. And so then fast forward to 2007 with the iPhone, people had communications in the phone, they were texting, they were doing internet communications, they were doing productivity tools, they were doing iPod with music and video and photos. And we were like, let's put it all together. And by the way, there was Wi-Fi and 2.5G, and we're like, and it all came together, and then it made sense, right? But only till society was ready to see the problems, have the problems, or at least some subset of society, to then be able to bring it to them.
One of the things I used to say with one of my friends that was a founder, obsessed product person, is you have to ask yourself always two questions. And when you have answers to these two questions, then you have a good product. Is I'm confused and I don't care. Keep saying I'm confused and I don't care. And once that doesn't exist, then you have a good product. Going back to the iPod, and you've also talked about that in your book. There's the vision and details. And there's also maybe in between an intuition. how do you think about the balance between your intuition, your vision, I believe in this thing, and I don't care that they don't care, but I know it's going to get there, but also I'm going to execute on this. Because ultimately, if you didn't really believe your intuition and your vision, we wouldn't have had the iPod.
Well, the iPod was there were MP3 players at the time, and obviously there were Walkmans that came before it. And so for me, when I did the first prototype of the iPod to give to Steve Jobs to put in his hand as a contractor, I had already been working on MP3 players for like 2 to 3 years, and I tried to get Swatch to actually build it. I tried to get Palm to actually build it back in the Palm Pilot days. I tried many different companies when I had MP3 players to get them to do it, and they didn't see it, right? So I had already believed in it because I was doing small handhelds after General Magic, small handhelds, and we were the first company to do audible audiobooks, in a portable form. And I was like, and I was a DJ at the time.
What was that? What year?
That was 96 or 97. 96 or 97 we were doing that.
Who was born then?
Yeah, who was born? Yeah, raise your hand.
Yeah.
And so we were doing the very first digital audio books. And I was like, and I'm carrying around all these CDs for these DJ gigs because vinyl was out. Vinyl was dead, not like it is today. And so I'm carrying on, and I'm like, there's got to be a better way. And I've been working on handhelds for a decade almost at that point. And I was like, what if we could put all of it in a device like that? And that's so I was doing that for about 3 or 4 years. And I was fully a believer. I made a startup around it. And Apple found out about me, and it turned into the iPod. But it was just having that conviction the whole way through. General Magic was a disaster. But it was all about digital handheld devices. I was building digital handheld devices at the University of Michigan. Then I went to Philips and started a whole division of Philips called Philips Mobile Computing Group, where we did Windows CE handheld devices, and one of them was the one that was playing audiobooks. So I was and during that time, the internet happened, and everybody turned to me and said, Tony, what are you doing with these stupid hardware things? It's all about the internet. Don't bother with that. You're not going to get any money for it. Nobody wants hardware. It's too hard, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, I'm just going to keep my heads down building this thing. And then I went off to do my own startup, Fuse, in '98, and doing handheld stuff as well. And everyone's like, you're crazy. I couldn't get any money. I got a little bit of money. And then the bubble burst of the internet in 2000. And there was no more money. And I scrambled and scrambled and scrambled, and I got a call from Apple. And they said, would you like to come and consult? And they told me we have iTunes, and would you like to bring would you like to bring all of the iTunes music in a portable form? What would you do? Taking all the things that, I'd already worked on. So I didn't give up. It was just persistence, but all the time. Like General Magic was learning about the target customer, and Philips was learning about sales and marketing, right? And so each of these things, and then it was learning about funding. So each time we failed, I learned, and then I made sure I applied that, and then the iPod happened.
But even the iPod, people romanticize that story. Even that story isn't a very sexy story. I mean, it was a few quarters away from Apple going broke, and I'm sure internally not everyone loved the product that you're working on or thought that there was like...
Well, there were people who just actually retired from Apple just a couple of months ago who did not want the iPod to even come into play. There was literally a whole set of people saying, we have 1% market share in the US and Japan. That was it, just for computers, 2 computer models. They had $250 million in the bank and $500 million in debt. There was no retail. Michael Dell said, let's shut down Apple and give all the money back to the shareholders. Like, it was a disaster company. And this was after Steve came back, and it was going to be the rise of Apple again, and it fell on its face. So I had 10 years of failure. And so for me to go, Steve goes, okay, now we're going to do this iPod thing, and Sony's #1 in the market. He's like, now you're going to join us. And I'm like, why do I want to join Apple? Like, you got to convince, now it's like, oh, of course, duh. But then it was literally on its last legs.
And then also, like, in the iPod story, there's also building under constraints and politics and all of that.
Sure. Well, so we had a whole faction of people who didn't want to do the iPod at Apple. Okay. But there was Steve, and Steve wanted it to happen. And he literally said, if anyone gets in your way, call me. And so a few people got in the way. I told Steve, and Steve, you know, I would call in the airstrike from above. You know, Steve would go, boom, boom. And it happened 2 or 3 times, and everybody got the message, because Apple was 3,500 people, maybe 4,000 people at the time. The message spread quickly. If this guy's calling, just give him what he wants, and don't give him any, because Steve's going to, like, literally go after you. And so we had this air cover, and this is what you have to do when you have a small team in a large company. Even then, it was a large company, is that you have to treat it like a baby. It can't be treated like another project. It's a baby, and you have to feed it, and you have to care for it and watch over it. And he did that for us. So he cleared the path while we just ran night and day and shipped the iPod 10 months later.
So I get like being stubborn, actually, you know, you've been stubborn for seems like a few decades before the iPod, you know, just going at it, but learning and not making the same mistakes.
Yeah, it was heads down. I just believe in this. I believe in this. And while the whole world was saying, go somewhere, I just kept going because I knew that this was an eventuality.
Talk about taste in your book. So is that something on intuition?
Well, you need to have taste. Yeah, absolutely. You know,
that's something you can learn.
Yeah, I learned it, but it's by discerning. It's, you know, you have taste when you design something from the guts, maybe when you're doing software or something. You know when an architecture is beautiful, a software architecture, a hardware architecture, all these kinds of things. But you also have to look at it, beauty from a customer journey, beauty from the branding, a beauty from the ID perspective, all these different things, user interface. So there is this sense of taste, and what happens is, in this day and age, a lot of times people just want to keep revving things and getting data, and the data will inform you of what way to go. And that's not the right way to do a 1.0 of anything. A 2.0, a 3.0, yeah, a little bit of data-driven decision-making is good, but most of the stuff in a 1.0 is an opinion, especially the ones that count for the customer differentiation, is opinion-based decisions. And most people treat opinion-based decisions as data-driven decisions. So if you go into large companies or even small companies, and especially with investors and everything, show me the data why this is the right direction. And you're like, no, this is just a taste decision. This is a vision decision. It's these kinds of things. And you have to have real strong reasons why the vision is the way it is and why it's not this and not that, but you'll never have the data. And now we have a whole set of companies around the world who just take your vision and they put data around it and they charge you $2 or $3 million. Those are consultancies. And they go, okay, we have this idea. And you go and pay them $2 million and they come back with a whole stack of data. This is why it's successful. So you can give it to your board, you can give it to your investors, you can give it around and say, see? They say it's going to be successful, and then you get the money and whatever else. And also, when it fails, because they don't know any better, you can point to them and go, they got it wrong. I was just following their advice. So you have to really understand the difference between data and opinion-based decisions, especially with the 1.0. And it does require vision, taste, and a lot of fuzziness. And it's not just engineering and data-driven decisions.
So it's opinions or opinion, because you seem like you have to put yourself in.
You can't have consensus. You have to have 1, 2, maybe 3 people total who really come together with that vision and say this, not that, this, not that. And you have to articulate it to the team. So you don't just say, wave the wand and say, we're going this way and this is the only way and don't challenge me. No, people can challenge, but you have to have really good reasons and rationale for why we're doing this and not that. So the team understands in their core why that decision was made and that they heard, like, we thought this, and we're like, we wouldn't do that because this, or we can do that, but version 2 because we don't have time for this, or whatever it is. And so you really need to make sure that when you are in charge of these opinion-based decisions, you also listen to other people, and you also tell them the reasons behind the decisions, the way they're made, so people can get on board. Or if they don't, you say, okay, leave the company or leave the project, go somewhere else. But get on board so that everybody is pulling in the same direction and there's not a lot of, you know, this and that and blame and everything else.
E14, we talk a lot about founders having 2 brains, at least initially. this community is the scientist brain and the founder brain. And they usually, some of these brains are at odds, where a scientist maybe is optimizing for universality, a founder is optimizing for just grit and for even sometimes cutting corners and just doing it. It seems that also like the taste brain or these like multiple brains in your head that you almost have to.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. You have to think of all those. But, you know, frankly, when you go to do your own company and you're getting money, you know, from third parties or whatever, you have to get onto engineering and developing and going. So before you commit to doing this thing, is you got to know that the science, for the most part's worked out. You don't go and do these other things, and because no one's going to fund a research project. Sorry, they're going to, oh yeah, okay, that's interesting. I know there's AI companies that saying they're fundamental labs and they're you know, this is a very special time. But if you do anything that's not AI right now, you're not getting any money. It's crazy how, you know this, right? No one's getting any, unless you have a really clear idea with a clear market, with clear customer, in some case, customer traction. So the scientist brain, that'll lead you to get to a business, but at some point you have to turn it off because you can't, when you start to see product market fit and all that stuff, then you can go into research mode again. But you're not doing basic science, basic research. You're doing applied stuff. So you come to, that's why you see all these companies hanging around MIT, the Media Lab and everything else. They're like, what's those latest ideas? Okay, we're going to translate that into a product, right? They're letting you guys do the science and research, and then they're trying to do the productization, translation.
You activate the engineering brain. You know, MIT is motor mens and manus. Maybe you have to activate now the hand part of the brain, like the engineering part versus the scientist.
Yeah, you have to activate the hand, and so you do the engineering side. But the thing is, especially if you're a technical founder, you have to really understand the soft skills of marketing and messaging, target customer development, user interface or user experience, customer journey design, all of those other things. And that's actually why I'm here, is because tomorrow I'm going to teach the first class on design of the customer journey. And we're
Why are you here?
Why am I here? I was asked to be a designer in residence at MAD, at the Morningside Academy of Design. And I'm here working with teams who are doing big projects, or alumni teams as well as graduate teams who are working on making their companies and helping them with discerning what it is they're doing, the why about it, their target customer, their go-to-market, all of those things, to really bring a board level like discussion and mentoring discussion into this kind of setting. Because a lot of times you guys get, oh yeah, keep going for it, yeah, and then you might get a little money because you're being very supportive. But you know you're very early stage. I'm Series A, I'm Series B, and I'm looking at it going, you don't got this right. Like, you got to worry about this, and you did that right, but you got to worry about all these other things to actually make a real company. And that's what I learned in those 10, 15 years of failure, and I still fail and still learning. So it's bringing all of that kind of stuff beyond the product itself.
Yeah.
Really understanding the other aspects that usually your technical brain doesn't think about.
You mentioned earlier with the iPod that, you know, it's hardware and hardware is hard, but you kept at it. You took a break, and you came back and went at the Nest.
Yeah, I took a year and a half off.
Well, actually, before the Nest, like, and I've seen that you did that a couple of times. Even after Nest, you did it. And say more about the importance of breaks when you.
Yeah, well, for me, you know, you go intensely and you go into a rabbit hole of building the company you want to build, and you know, you got to sometimes tune out a lot of the naysayers. You got to listen to certain people that you really respect and try to navigate through all that. And it really, it's draining. It's full on. You know, you got to be all in for that. And
was it 18 generations of iPod?
18 generations of iPod and 3 generations of iPhone. Yeah, and 10 years. So that was a lot. Plus all the accessories, you know, there's all the other variants and all the other things. So that's just the tip of the iceberg kind of thing. And putting up manufacturing, and so it's an intense time. And so what I was like, oh, well, do I want to do version 19 of the iPod? Do I want to use, and then the iPhone's like, oh yeah, we got the next one. I'm like, I've been on this treadmill. enough of this treadmill. I can't do this anymore. I was like, I need to do something else. We have a great team. The people behind me are going to be able to rise up and take it over, and they did, right? It's working brilliantly. And so I wanted to take a time off, and I wanted to get out of the Silicon Valley, and I went traveling around the world. And I went traveling around the world because I wanted inspiration from real problems. For me, it's problems that give me the inspiration to build what it is we build. And starting with that pain, and then trying to find the right painkiller. And so as I traveled around the world for a year and a half, and I already had a pain of controlling my thermostat in a remote mountain location, and mocking it up for 8-9 years, and it was all failing. I was like, and I was building a new house. I was like, oh, someone over those 10 years must have solved this problem. No one solved the problem. And then I was like, okay, and then I'm traveling around the world, and I'm like, I'm in Spain. Thermostat sucked. I'm in the UK, thermostat stuck. France, the thermostat stuck. I'm in Hawaii. I'm in Asia. And like everywhere I went, I was like, this is a global problem. Everybody has the same problem. No one's fixed it anywhere. I was like, ding, 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 ding. And so I was like, and we can take all that stuff that was learned from iPod and iPhone and before that and say, okay, and now we have all the technology, and people have the remote control to their life in their hand, which is a smartphone. Okay, now let's have devices that you're going to control remotely and put AI in them. The Nest thermostat was one of the very first consumer products to actually have real working AI in it in 2011.
We didn't call it AI.
We didn't call it AI because AI would have scared people. Now, if you don't have AI, forget it. You're nobody. But then we had to call it learning. So we called it learning.
What did you underestimate going into Nest?
What did I underestimate? That's a good question. To tell you the truth, we underestimated how freaking popular the product would become. We were like, this is a crazy idea. We're going to make, I think it was 10,000 units for the first production. We're going to just buy all that stuff. We were out of stock for 2.5 years. We could not, we would keep ramping up the quantities, and we could never fulfill demand. It was crazy. People were putting them under the Christmas tree and giving them as gifts. They were on the talk shows, the late night talk shows. Like, it was crazy. So what we underestimated was just how much people were wanting these things. And it wasn't just geeks. It was people who really wanted to save energy, or they just couldn't stand looking at that ugly thing on the wall anymore, and they didn't know how to use it. So that was, I think, what it is. Other than that, we had a stellar team, and we really, had, because a lot of us had worked together for 10 years, some of us 20 years at that point. So
the product is gorgeous and was gorgeous even back then. What about installations for the Nest? Was that a friction for scale?
Well, that's the customer journey. And so what we quickly learned was, as we were said, okay, we're going to have a great product, but right now nobody knows how to install the product. You have to call, the overalls and the butt crack plumber or HVAC guy to come and install it. And what would turn out, and this is what we learned, was these guys were actually, they would get bonuses from Honeywell and the competitors in the field. So if they sold 10 of their thermostats or 20 thermostats in a quarter or something, they get a free trip to Hawaii. Okay? So if we had these people, we're trying to convince them to sell our product that was more expensive, that didn't give them a trip to Hawaii, that it was like digital, and they're like, what is that? I can just sell 20 of these. And like, there was no way we're going to get this to market. So we had a disruptive product, but we had to find a disruptive way to market because it wasn't going to happen that way. And what that meant was you go to Best Buy or somewhere and you figure out how to self-install it. So we had to create all of these configurators, these special switches on the device, these installation menus and things, very, very streamlined. And we were worried that we were like, okay, I was like, if we could get 40 to 50% of the products to be self-installed, we've won. So 50% self-installed, 50% professional installed. We spent so much time and energy on it. We put in a screwdriver in the box. We probably put $15 more in components in the product to make it self-installable, that after the first quarter, 90 to 95% of all the products were self-installed. And that blew us away. And that's why we had the volumes that were crazy. We had grandmas going, on YouTube videos, going, I just installed this. And we're like, and it became this thing. And so we didn't know. And so when you do a really great job of not just the product, but the whole customer journey, because there was all kinds of things on the marketing, on the website, all these different things to make sure you knew how to install it really easily, that it was frictionless for a lot of people, and they felt like it was a superpower. A lot of them weren't makers. Nobody really installed these kinds of things. They wouldn't install an electrical switch in their house, but they installed a thermostat, and it worked, and they go, oh my God. It was almost like, that was also in the maker days too, and be like, so it was really cool.
What was a non-obvious design decision?
Non-obvious?
Non-obvious.
Well, okay, there was one thing, which was because it was round, how do you know? Because you had to put a plate on the wall, and then you had to put the faceplate on the front half of it on there. And people would be like, well, if I put it on wrong, and it's going to be like the interface could be tilted or whatever. So I said, let's put a level on it. So we put a bubble level on it so that you could bubble level the backs to get it right, screw it in, and then ding, and it worked every time, right? So it was like, that was non-obvious. And now guess what? If you go and look at almost all the thermostats that are out there now, they all have bubble levels in it.
That's going back to your grandfather's, actually.
Exactly, all the way back to real analog. And that thing, I think in the bill of material, I think that was about 15 cents, that alcohol bubble level.
I'm sure you had plenty of ideas for the Nest, and you had to kill a lot of them. If I'm in your shop, I'm just guessing, like, you can do this thing and that thing and this thing and whatever, but you kept true to the product, and the simplicity was ultimately the beauty of the product. How did you go about shooting off or saying no to things?
Well, the great thing there was it was mostly software driven. Once you had the hardware there, it was software driven. So we could say, okay, that'll be the next version of software, because it was Wi-Fi connected and whatever. So we could update it. Thermostats had none of that, right? But we knew what it was like to have it in our smartphones, right? So we were just like, hey, we just need to get it out there for this, and we'll make it better over time.
That's great. Early days also of Nest, maybe you want to talk about founders. A lot of founders in the room. They want to think about finding co-founders and early team. If I'm not mistaken, your co-founder at Nest was also worked with you at Apple.
Well, he was my first intern on the iPod project. So my co-founder at Nest was my first intern on the iPod project.
And how long did you work together at iPod?
Oh, well, he was an intern 2 years for 2 summers, and then he came on full time after it. So we were probably together, I don't know, like 5 years, 5, something like that.
What made him a great co-founder for Nest?
Oh, he was just absolutely incredibly curious. He would just make it happen. It was, it was clear. You're like, oh, outstanding guy. And people, the other thing that happened was, and you have to do this when you're, when you're building a team in a startup, you need to make sure your first hires are seed crystals, right? We all know what seed crystals are from chemical engineering, right? Boom, you get that one person who has a network of people who they can pull in, right? And he was also a generation below me. So he could get all the younger engineers, I could get all the older people. It's because what happens is if you don't get all of that age right, you're going to get one class of people in there, and you want both. And then over time as Nest grew, I was like, every team, 10% to 15% of all of your new employees had to be fresh grads. And they'd be like, no, they don't have any experience. I said, I don't care. Who gave you the leg up when you were coming out of school? We need to keep refreshing the talent in our organization and staying young. And the way we're going to stay young and keep thinking young is to make sure we have other young people on the team, because you can see these kind of, startups age up, and they don't hire because they're like, I don't want to invest in the latest generation because they're too hard, or they're millennials or whatever, or Gen Z, and it doesn't work that way,
Maybe then the opposite side. What was the most expensive or most costly hire?
Costly hire?
from a mistake perspective?
Well, you're going to always make mistakes in hiring. Like you have to understand, just like in engineering or coding or anything, you're going to make a mistake. Just fix it really fast. So when you do make a mistake, you can see it and you go, look, this isn't working out, and you got to exit that person pretty fast. I'm not saying fire them in a guillotine or something like that, but no. But what I'm saying is you got to exit it really fast. And what happens is almost everybody who works with that person in the team knows it's a problem. They're just waiting for you to actually make the action. You know, they're all like, okay. And so they're like, okay, when is this going to happen? Because it's not working. And then finally you do it, and they're like, everyone's like, thank God. But nobody tells you this, really. Maybe there's one or two, but nobody really tells you this the way, but the team knows it already.
Yeah, we with our founders at E14, I don't think there's any founder who said, I wish I fired that person a bit too late, a bit later. It's always like, you get to know it earlier. But also the biggest mistake that founders make, particularly in this crowd, engineering, scientists, et cetera, is hiring a salesperson because they're going to come and help you save and sell. And we always talk about founder-led sales and how, as an engineer, as a scientist, you're the one who knows your tech the best, and you're the one who has to go at it. Would you agree, or?
Well, there's
At least early on.
Well, it depends on how early, and to really understand product market fit and to really understand your customer, and we're talking about a B2B sale here, not a B2C. B2B companies and B2C companies are totally different in how you staff them, how you think about designing the product and everything. And most companies, unless they're really big conglomerates like Microsoft, that can have Xbox on one side and corporate Windows on another and servers, you can do that. But most companies, small companies or even medium-sized, they're B2C or B2B. They can't be both because they get schizophrenic because you're hiring two different types of people. You design your products differently, spec them differently. And so in a B2B area, yes, you can be a founder-led sales because you're going to go sit with those customers, listen to them, and over time, modify the product roadmap and stuff. In a B2C, you don't get that. You get one shot to get it right. And so you get out with the brand, and we saw what happened with Humane, we saw what happened with Rabbit, we saw, all that stuff. And so, they just didn't hit it because they just thought about technical or geek stuff. They didn't think about all the other pieces of the puzzle to make that thing work.
We were talking earlier, just before going on stage, about some of these crazy valuations these days in AI companies, and I asked you something, and didn't hear the full answer, but I'd love to hear it here. Have you seen good AI products?
Absolutely. We're investors in a few of them.
Tell me more.
But we started investing in 10 years ago, 8 years ago, in companies that did AI. We have a company called Orianis Biosciences right here in Waltham, and they do AI drug design. And they've been working on their engine for, like I said, 10 years. And we have multiple drugs. One's in FDA phase 2. We're already helping people. We have tons of drugs behind it. We've done hundreds of millions of dollars of contracts with Genentech, Novartis, and it's all based on our AI-driven affinity binding solutions. So that's one. We have another one called Nabla out of Paris. We are a medical assistant for medical scribe, medical billing, insurance, pre-authorization, all of the paperwork, everything. And that was out of Paris, and now they're number 2 here in the U.S. doing it. And they got, $40–50 million in revenue now, and that's AI-driven. We have one in recycling, so doing classification and sorting for recycling with AI as a camera, the conveyor belt goes and helps you do that analysis. So yeah, there's lots of stuff, but it's not these AGI, boil the ocean, tens of billions of dollars necessary to build. There's lots of incredible, narrow-focused AI stuff that doesn't hallucinate, that's incredibly valuable. It's like they're shooting the moon, as opposed to, okay, what are the pains that can be solved today? Like humanoid robots. Yeah, right. So they're cool, but no. It's just like self-driving cars in 2006. They're cool. They're finally here 20 years later. If you started a company anywhere along the route, it's more or less dead, unless you were Google, where you funded Waymo with all your advertising for years and years and years. So you got to remember, again, this is just like General Magic, when's the right timing? And it's not just when society will adopt it, but when all the technology lines up. And when it's going to be just about economical, right? And we don't even have the right AI base technology to be able to do the things we need to do for humanoid robots. We don't even have the tactility or the sensing that we need for humanoid robots.
Yeah, that's great. We're privileged at E14 to work with many amazing founders in AI, including manipulation and dexterity, and also on the fuel for AI on the bottom of the layer. I think you're also on the board of ARM. We have a few companies on the memory side. I think one of the founders is in the room, decoupling memory from GPU. So also on the knowledge, like code.
Yeah, all that stuff is great stuff, and those things are all building blocks for these things that we're talking about, right? It's all coming up. I was investor in Grok, and that just went, and so but you got to be a smart investor and also a smart entrepreneur. You have to understand that you can shoot the moon, but why don't you look at all the other pieces of the puzzle that are going to need to be morphed on to be able to get to this vision? And that's what we were doing post-General Magic with all the other devices and the things I was working on to finally make the iPhone. The iPhone wouldn't have happened if you didn't do the iPod.
Yeah, that's why we're investing in the whole stack. We think there's opportunities across knowledge workers, physical workers, and kind of the fuel.
Absolutely.
I want to go through kind of quick underrated, overrated, and why.
Underrated or overrated?
Yeah.
Right?
All right. We'll start with easy ones. Vision.
Vision? It's in the middle. If you can't implement, it's a maybe. If you can't implement, vision's no good. Everyone has an idea, but if you can't implement, it doesn't matter. So you got to have both. You can't just implement. You got to have both.
Failing fast.
Failing fast? Failing quickly. I wouldn't say fast, because that's how we learn. When we learn to walk, we don't learn to walk the first time. We fail 1,000 times before we learn to walk. So we have to, keep iterating to get there, but that's the only way we learn. So you need to fail to learn.
MBA.
MBA? Overrated.
Let's see.
I guess I didn't have to tell you why.
Oh, we agree. Why? Yeah, why?
Why? Oh, it's very simply. Because it's actually that stuff's easy to learn, and there's a lot of people who will teach you on the job. Engineering and fundamental sciences and building things and how to do messaging and that stuff, that's really hard. But MBA stuff, there's a lot of stuff. And frankly, I think if you can think of one thing that AI could actually do pretty well, it's that.
Being data-driven.
Well, we just talked about it. In certain cases, in version 2, 3, 4, for sure. Or I should say data-informed decisions, not AI-driven decisions. A very different thing.
Silicon Valley.
Silicon Valley, now, it's still important, but it's nowhere near as important as it used to be.
OpenAI.
Overrated.
Is there a why?
Is there a why? Yeah, there's a reason why. You look at, just compare Anthropic to OpenAI. One company is going really hard at application. Applications are the things that make money. Platforms do not. The last successful platform was Windows. Okay, and now they don't even charge for Windows. But when Windows was a thing in Windows 95 or whatever, it was a thing and you paid for Windows, right? That was the last consumer platform that you paid. No one's done that since. And so, sure, there's AWS platforms, but that's B2B. I'm talking consumer platform, no one pays. So you have to do applications. Dario's doing an amazing job of finding incredible applications, exploiting them and doing it in a special way. You have Sam going, one day I'm going to be a chatbot, the next day I'm going to be medical, the next day I'm going to do legal, you're like, and when I said B2C versus B2B, what are you, dude? Like, you got to pick. You can't be one or the other. People, you think medical facilities are going to sign up with you doing this and then you're also doing that? We see this at Nabla, our medical company, medically, I think. You got to really understand that customer. You got to be in front of them. They got to trust it because they're going to be using, their doctors are using it every day. And it requires a certain kind of discipline around your technology and how you sell to build that trust to get them to buy.
I know your interests also expand beyond AI and beyond the stuff that we're talking about so far, maybe nuclear fusion.
Yeah, I'm definitely in fusion. So I'm doing RF-contained Z-pinch fusion out of Berkeley. It's really cool stuff.
YC.
Overrated now. It wasn't back in the day, but it is now. It's just spray and pray. They just, it's a big numbers game. Kind of like the big VCs now. They're not even VCs. They're really assets under management PE companies in a lot of ways.
Yeah. What's up with that? Like, do you think that's going to...
What's up with that? Great fees. They get a lot of fees. It's like, don't invest in a hedge fund fee. Why? Because the fees are too high. Don't invest in PE fund. Why? Because the fees are too much. These are just the same thing,
But do you think that's going to mess up a little bit kind of the game? It's like we're seeing these companies raising crazy rounds, and it just feels like just these big funds just want to deploy. And they don't want them to lose because they've put already a lot of money in them, so they want to put more money because they want to...
Yeah, and I lived through 2000 as well.
You think we're in that?
Oh, look. Of course, the internet was important. Whenever a technology is incredibly important, you're going to have a bubble. Mm-hmm. But what were the most successful companies? The ones that lasted through the bubble, called Google in 2003 and 2004. Google was not in the bubble in '99 like Yahoo was and a lot of pets.com, whatever it was. All that stuff went to the wayside, and then the real companies who said, we're going to have, a real user model, real revenue model, unit economics. They're the ones that lasted after the bubble. Even though Google was started in '99, I think it was. Right, Megan? 99? Yeah, 99 or 98.
University degrees.
What?
Degrees from universities.
I think they're one important piece for sure, because it's not just about what you know, it's about who you know. And it's about having networks of people that they learn. Thank you. Thank you. And so, to say I don't need it because I have AI that's going to, no. There's a critical thinking aspect. There's a humanity aspect because we need teams of people to build this stuff. And you want to be able to talk to people. And an AI is not going to replace this.
You know how Peter Thiel has this fellowship, 100K fellowship?
Yeah. And look what happened to Luminar. Yeah. Okay, moving on.
We have actually the anti-Thiel fellowship at E14. We've been doing it since 2013. I think we've done 150 investments where if you're about to drop out and you want to raise some money, we will give you money to stay at MIT. We will commit, a simple check, so not our 50, 100K check. We'll say, stay on. That's a check for you, but you'll get it once you graduate or once you defend. So we've been seeing, that's a thing, right?
That's great. That's really great. And, I think the thing is also being in school gets you through the grind of whatever it is through the finals, through the process, to understand, like, life is it's actually infinitely easier here than it is actually in reality, like when you leave this thing, because it's really, really hard. You don't have a whole set of, like, MIT is so welcoming and everybody helps, from what I've seen is everyone's helping each other. Like it's really incredible. You go out to the real world, good luck. Everyone's got your back and they're like, they're ready to take you out. Silicon Valley used to be like that. It's not like that anymore.
So last one, you just touched on it, but MIT.
It's been tremendous experience for me, and I've just been loving it. So I think from MIT is underrated for the incredible talent that can build amazing companies. I think it needs to take that next step to really put a little bit more into professionalization of those companies. There's so many great ideas, but they don't go to that next level. And I think there's that next level. And that's why I'm here. That's why I love this design of the customer journey and that stuff, is to really get it to that next step, to take it so that, I think of it as like, I look at Cambridge, because I go to Cambridge all the time because of ARM and...
The other Cambridge.
The other Cambridge, yes, the other Cambridge. And they're like amazing people, but they can't translate almost anything into a real business. You know what I mean? Or that business gets sold for nothing to an American company who then capitalizes on it. And I want to still see more of that happening here on this side of the the U.S. and not just in Silicon Valley.
Don't we're privileged that you're at MIT, and we're honored that you're also with us today.
I'm privileged to be here. Seriously, thank you
so
all.
much for
Wow,
participating with
look at
us.
this.
I think we're going to try and get a few questions from the crowd, but thank you so much. Join me in thanking.
Thank you, everybody.
And
Thanks. Great to be here. Thank you.
Take a question. We're going to take a selfie with Tony, so indulge me on this one.
Okay. So.
And then we'll take questions. You have time to think.
Sure. Okay. Oh, get down. Get up. Yeah. Make sure we get the upper deck.
Awesome.
Okay. Cool.
All right.
All right. Questions.
Questions.
Anyone with a question? Hang on for the mic. Try to keep them short because we've got a lot of folks here.
This is short. I mean,
What's your name?
I'm Max. I'm a postdoc here.
Hi, Max.
You say that 30 years ago you were told, forget about hardware, focus on internet. Today, I listen every day, forget about hardware, focus on AI. What is your advice for today's builder? Should we focus on AI, mix both, or just keep believing in hardware?
Look, I think we all understand that AI is driven by data, not by code. It's all about data. And guess what? You need enabling hardware to get the sensing to be able to drive the AI. What we're seeing is a bunch of, if you want any kind of AI to be in the real world, like what we're doing is they're sucking up all the data on the internet, digital stuff. But we don't have anywhere near the data sets for humanoid robots or any of the other things in chemistry, in biology, all these other, we need tons of data sets, and that requires enabling hardware. We saw how long it took for the sensors, the networks to get right for self-driving cars, right? We're finally there. It's always going to be a full stack to really exploit the technology the right thing. Software doesn't just eat the world. It needs enabling technology. It needs hardware. It needs sensing and output. And so you're going to it's never going to go away. It may not be in fashion sometimes, but it's a pendulum that swings. And right now it's in fashion, and I think it's going to be in fashion for a long time.
Hey, Hamid. Would love to understand your reservations against humanoid robots, especially considering they're trying to solve multiple pain points at the same time.
Right. Well, that's one of the things right there, multiple pain points at the same time. So especially when you're trying to make something general, you first have to know the specific cases to do it, right? And so there's two things. You have to look at humanoids when it comes to B2C and humanoids from B2B. In humanoids in B2B, you have very fixed cases. You can say, these workers do these 5 jobs more or less every day, 24/7. In a B2C context, it's a different thing every minute. It's pick this up, do this, do that. And you have no idea what you're going to throw at it. You have to crawl before you walk, before you run. And so you're seeing, like with self-driving cars, they're not just being sold to anybody, right? They had to get started with, crawling and walking and running, right? So it's the same thing. So first, I don't believe in B2C humanoids anytime soon because of that problem of that stuff. Very narrowly defined humanoid robots, like you see at Agile Robotics, those kinds of things, it can work because they're very, very narrow workloads. To go to the next level, we do not have the world models, the continuous learning, the necessary thing, and the tactility, the manipulation, and all the other stuff for very, very diverse workloads in a humanoid robot in a B2B context. So it's going to take time, just like self-driving. Is it never going to happen? Absolutely not. It's a matter of when, not if. But there's a lot of enabling technologies that need to go into those. Even if you see them jump and flip, it's just like, okay, interesting. Just like we're finally starting to see interesting applications of, Gen AI, right? First it was, okay, we can change and morph the face and blah, 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 and take some time. But this requires hardware, this requires sensors, this requires new models, world models, these kinds of things that don't exist yet. They're on the horizon. So if I were working on robotics or whatever, those kinds of robotics, I'd be working on world models, I'd be working on continuous learning, I'd be working on sensors, and all the stuff in between.
Oh, thank you for sharing. I'm Edward, a graduate student here. So you've been both an entrepreneur and an investor. So you've been on both sides. And
a corporate wonk, too.
Yeah, so as an entrepreneur, what is something that you try to get right when you're starting something? And on the opposing side, as an investor, what is something that you look for when when evaluating teams and their ideas?
The first thing comes down to what pain are you solving? The first thing is, what pain are you solving, for whom, how big is it? Pain, pain, pain. Obviously, there's other things, but I've always found that if you start from a source of pain and you can make a painkiller and maybe even turn it into a superpower, the painkiller, then you have something. So I have to get hooked there. I don't get hooked on, ooh, look at this cool technology. I look at, this is the pain, and here's the new technology that just showed up to solve that pain that was never existing before today. And we can solve it. Maybe there was a painkiller, but this one's going to be 10x better painkiller than before, or cheaper, or whatever it is, so that we can target a bigger market to bring that painkiller to them. That's what I like to see. And whether that's an investor or an entrepreneur, they should be aligned. If they're looking at money, 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 like the VC is, or the entrepreneur is, I walk out of the room. It's about the mission. If you do a really good job of the mission and the painkiller, the money will come. Okay? Next. What's your name?
Eunice, I'm a PhD student here. I just had a quick question. So it seems like you've been very, very successful in your life, but you've also encountered a lot of difficulties and failures. So my question is, during those times of failures where you should spend $500 million or something, it's not working out, what is your playbook for getting yourself back up?
You have to, the big thing to understand is failure is the way you learn. So either you're going to look at yourself and you say, I'm a failure, or you say, what we did, what we failed at, and here were the reasons why, and here's how we're not going to let that happen again. So it's about internalizing it and saying, I'm the failure, or saying, what did we do wrong? What could we fix next time to get that? And that's a big part of it. Because a lot of people can go into a downward spiral because they just say, I failed. And they hear other people saying that. You got to tune all that out. It's about really, it's the learning thing. So like I brought up that example of, you know, you have to fail at walking 1,000 times before you learn to walk. Well, the reason why you learn to walk is because you have an environment around you, your parents, your family, friends, whatever, and they're like, oh my God, you stood up, yeah, go for it. And you try again, and you try again. You got to be in the right environment. If you're in an environment and the parents go, they fell over, they're never going to walk, forget it. That's what happens a lot of times in school. That's what we learn. Like, we're in this incredible, optimistic, you know, supportive environment in the home, and then you go into school and you're like, if you don't get an A, you're going to fail, and your life is going nowhere, right? And so that's the wrong environment. Like, and we get trained that after we go through this supportive environment, we go into this incredibly stupid environment that tells you you're going to fail if you don't get the A. Right? And I know we're all here at MIT and it's all wonderful, but there's a lot of people who didn't get here, right? And they think they're failures because they were told, if you didn't get the A and you didn't get into that school, you're a failure. You got to flip the script when you get out of school, and you got to understand, you got to go back to that environment when you were learning to walk and learning to talk and those kinds of things. Because you got to surround yourself with investors, mentors who are going to build, you know, help you build whatever it is you're building, not just the product, but yourself. And the only reason why I'm sitting up here is because I had mentors who helped me get here even through the tough times. So when you get out of here and you're doing stuff real hard, make sure you surround yourself and be in an environment that's supportive, and you learn from it, and you don't, you know, slack off and just fail to fail, but you do it and you know you're learning for a reason. That's how you pick yourself and you keep moving up. Keep moving through it. Cool? Oh, yes, please. I need some. All right, next question.
Hello, my name is Thomas. With increasing technology, we're connected more than ever. However, we do have these groups of people who are now more isolated than ever. Can you talk about how you design for genuine human connection, and if there's a way to even substitute or supplement kind of what you mentioned of what we have here of who you know?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Look, I was going through this because I grew up before there were computers. Like, I was 10 when I got my first computer, and I became more isolated over time. And you looked and like it was 90, my life was 100% analog. And then through the years, it became 2% digital and 90, and then 30% and 10% and 50% and more and more and more. And now we're getting to the point where, especially kids growing up, they're like 98% digital and 2% analog, right? And that's not the right way to be. And so we have to make sure we balance that out. And we want to have these tools in support of humanity, not to be screens between us, programming our brains and, brainwashing us or, selling us the next thing, and it's everything. We don't have this kind of connection. And so it's incumbent on those who build the stuff to make sure they do such a thing. And I know when I started seeing, I had friends whose kids were going through digital addiction therapy, like literally they were going through digital addiction. I said, enough's enough. And I went on the TV, different TV programs. I went all over in 2015, 2016, 17. And I said, there's a problem here. And I was one of a bunch of people who got Apple to put screen time in on iPhones, right? And they hated it. They hated people doing that. We need to keep doing that. Yeah, I think we need to have age verification in our app stores. We don't have that. They're fighting it. I don't know why. We need to build the environment that we want to see. And we can't just assume everybody's going to have the technology. And so it's incumbent about those creating it. And you see somebody like Dario at Anthropic saying we need to have safe. And Ilya's doing the same thing at SSI. So we need to have more leaders like that doing that and not, Grok AI, doing what they do. So, it's just up to each of us to do that and make sure it's built in. I will tell you this, though. You think about the world very, very differently when you have kids. How many in here have kids in the room? Raise your hand. Yeah, a lot of you don't. And so a lot of times founders don't have any kids. They're single or whatever. And they make a lot of product decisions because they are individuating from their family. They are, I am me, I'm the strong individual. And I'll tell you this, they would make a lot of different, and I know guys and girls who are leaders in this industry who would make decisions very, very differently now that they have families than when they were creating things like Facebook or whatever when they were single, right? And so you have to always remember that there's a reason why you're here, because you had a supportive environment and what have you. And you have to make sure you continue to have that supportive environment for the next generations and generations to come. And the stuff that we build can be very powerful, both positively and negatively. And we have to think about that as we build things.
I have a simple question. What was it like working with Steve Jobs?
Oh, the best of times, it was the worst of times. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. No, it was great. The biggest thing to understand is that he really pushed to get the right answer and said no a lot. And it took a lot to be able to go things forward. But you need someone or a leader like that who's trying to take incredibly big risks and be really clear on what it is we're doing. And he would always say no a lot more than he said yes, because when you said no a lot, the yeses meant that much more. Okay, more.
Thoughts about the future?
What's your name?
Oh, my name is Rania. I'm an alum. And what are your thoughts on the future of the user interface, right?
Okay. Thoughts of user interface. The first thing to understand is a fundamental thing is that the best way to visualize visual information is with a display. So we've all watched the movie Her, and oh my God, it's wonderful. But at the end of the day, even in Her, they had a screen. And so we already have a screen in our pockets. It's there. Now it's folding, it's bigger, whatever. But you still need a screen. It's not, unless it starts to be a BCI, brain computer, or we have something, projecting into our retinas. The best way to visualize visual things is with a display. And we have displays on us now. So to think that the smartphone's going to go away anytime soon, it ain't. Because we need to visualize stuff. So that's the first thing. The second thing to understand is that I believe we're going to go to much more voice-focused interfaces. And the reason why they're not here today was somewhat the technology, but it is because we have been programmed to use touch and keyboards first. Those are the primary and secondary interfaces. Voice, when you tacked on Siri or whatever else, you know, were tertiary interfaces. If you go and start designing and throwing out everything and designing for the voice interface, you're going to have very different products from the way you use them. They might still have the same form factor, but they'll have very, very different usability. And the only way we're going to get there is by a company, could be big, could be small, whatever, is to redesign around a voice primary interface with touch secondary and keyboard tertiary. It's still going to have a screen, or it could be your in-ears too. And then all of a sudden, things start to work because you can have that display in your pocket and you can start to talk to it, right? And it's still talking to this. It's just, oh, and then, hey, I need a map. Okay, think. But because the voice is primary, you're going to start to use it as opposed to what it is today. It's tertiary, and nobody uses a tertiary interface. Everybody knows you have all voice commands in your car, and nobody uses it, right? So you have to have a very, very different mental model, a very, very different application usage model, and you have to have the boldness to reinvent the interface. Just like the interface was reinvented for multi-touch, we reinvented the interface for a click wheel. You have to do, and the mouse and keyboard. You have to reinvent if you want to have a new modality. And no one's taken that on yet.
I'm going to have to give a shout out to Alter Ego that you met as well.
Yes.
The company has spun out from a few floors up with a silent speech interface, which also thank you again for meeting with them and giving them some
no
thoughts.
problem.
We also believe that that's going to change the modality of even not just the input, but just the communication scheme is going to make things much more different than just expecting words to come onto a screen or into...
Exactly, yeah, Alter Ego, and then if you saw today, Apple just purchased QAI, which does something similar to Alter Ego, I think for a few $1 billion. So, which was a voice interface.
It started.
It started.
Thank you so much for the talk. I have one question.
What's your name?
Jack.
Jack.
I'm in Tindall right here. My question is, are you concerned at all with the diminishing touch that we encounter in our lived embodied experiences?
You mean tactile interfaces?
Tactile.
Yeah.
And not even interfaces, but just we eat food now not based off of how it tastes, but how it looks on an Instagram page. And as we become a more materialistic culture, that's also aligned with us actually interacting with materials less and less, and it just kind of becomes visual information. And I sometimes worry that the dependence of both, not even screens, but then the loss of the screen going to then voice agents, causes us to disembody ourselves and can make us more anxious.
We become brains in a vat.
Brains in a vat, exactly. And I wonder where you think the importance of touch is, and if touch does have a role in the future of interface.
Absolutely. Look, if you look, all the cars decided to do what Tesla did. We're getting rid of the buttons. Guess what? 2026, they're putting them all back in. Even the new electric cars, everybody's putting buttons back in because a tactile interface is the right way. I remember when we were first doing Nest. So this is the multi-touch guy here and the click wheel guy, right? The multi-touch guy. So we're going to build the thermostat. Slew remembers this very well. Yes, Slew? And everyone's like, it's got to have touchscreen. And I'm like, why? Because that's the fad. Everybody needs to have touchscreens. Just like with BlackBerry, everything had to have physical keyboards. iPhone didn't have it. And I was like, we don't need to have a touch screen because all you do is care about turning up and down the temperature. That's all you do with thermostat. Like, we're going to have a good old analog interface and just do this with, digital haptics and all that stuff. People loved it. We didn't have to have it. We didn't need to have the touchscreen. So you have to look at the modality, the environment you're in, and you have to not follow the herd with trends. You have to really understand what humans need in that given situation and design for it and just lock out. And this is the whole taste question and the vision question, and not data-driven design, but real, design, vision-driven design. So that's what I'd say. So yes, we absolutely are going to have it. We're actually going to be craving more and more touch as we make more things digital. So keep doing what you're doing. Oh, there. Hello. What's your name?
Hello, Hayat Al Hassan. You emphasized focusing or starting with pain, and then you said, then find a technology that solves it, that is kind of new, hasn't been able to solve it before, and kind of go from there. I'm wondering, what would your advice be or what would you do if you were an MIT student today in terms of how you would leverage the space in your exploration/ideation process?
Leverage, you mean MIT?
Yeah, I mean...
Well, I walked around these labs. I've met a lot of the different researchers and everything. And I immediately think about problems that I have in everyday life or I know of other people that have. And I go, oh, that'll work for this. That'll work for that. So I'm always trying to look at life and find those pain points. And so I make a list of those. And then I go, well, why is that been designed the way it is? Like, why is it so painful to use? And like, oh, they didn't have the right technology, or that was the cheapest way of doing it. Is there a new, better way of doing it? So I'm always looking for things that are friction in the environment that just don't make any sense anymore, but people have abstracted it in a way, they've kind of habituated it away. They're like, oh, it's like that. You guys know like your shower handle. The shower handle, and you go, you just take it a little bit, and it gets too hot. And you turn it just a little bit, it gets too cold. Like, you're like, why doesn't it work better? Like, why can't it work better? And so, and sooner or later, you've done it 3 times for your shower, and you're like, okay, I just have to do this. And you don't even think about it anymore. Well, I try to tune into those things. And I try to make sure I remember that pain every day. And not put it out of my brain and go, okay, and then that keeps me sensitized to when I see, because we live in these worlds of technology and we read about new things popping up all the time. You're like, oh, I can apply that to this problem now. And that's how I do it.
There's going to be 5 shower cup startups tomorrow.
Yeah, right, sure. All right.
Thank you so much for your presentation. So my name is Ivan, and your comment about the over-reliance of younger generations of screen really resonated with me, because I'm building this AI hardware solution to target this problem. And my personal concern is we see a lot of AI applications that are on the software spectrum that getting some traction, but not so much on the hardware side. Like you criticized as well the Humane that flopped and similar applications to this. What do you think is the biggest bottleneck for consumer hardware at this moment, especially if it leverages AI to enter the market, and what can be the reason why so many products flop?
That's a huge question. I can't answer that because it's not specific enough. But what I can tell you is this. I have a chapter in my book about this, which is don't make hardware unless you really, really need to. I love hardware and I can't stand it. And so if I ever see it, I'm like, how do I make something without the hardware? And then only if I really absolutely need an enabling piece of hardware for a system I'm building, then I'll do it. But you have to be really honest with yourself if you really need that hardware. Because I know it's fun and tactile and all that other stuff, but sometimes you really don't need it. And in most cases, you don't. People just see it and like, I can build that, but they don't really look at all the other pieces and get it right. So don't distract yourself with such things.
And we have one last question there.
My name is Eva, and my question is, how do you know when to stop? And like, when do you know what you made is like good and that people will want it?
Well, you got to put it in people's hands, and they'll tell you whether or not it's good because they'll vote with their money or their time or what have you. But the great thing about this world of technology and building things, whether it's hardware or software or some combination, is that there's always room for improvement. There's very few times, maybe, like you see a paperclip, it's perfect, right? Paperclip is perfect. But there's always to innovate how to make it and how to distribute it. And that's the great thing about what it is we do, is that there's usually always another version after it, because you can see only so far, you solve the problem and you keep going. And that's what drives me every day. And so you get in it, it's a great disease to have. You just can't get out of building, because it's a wonderful feeling to be able to bend the arc of the planet, hopefully for a good. So I encourage you to stay in it and be a builder.
Well, thank you, Eva, for the prompt.
Thank you.
On the question of knowing when to stop, I think we're going to stop here, because I know we took so much of your time, and you have a big day coming tomorrow as well.
Big day tomorrow, big day. I got to save
Thank you
myself.
so much for your generous time. Thank you so much, everyone, for showing up. Again,
Thank you, everybody.
There's a QR code. If you can go one slide back up, Andrea, QR code for E14 if you'd like to apply, join our programs. There's a mixer that some people are going to go to work with. I think it's around the corner, Johnny Flat Top, so feel free to go and join for drinks. Thank you again for coming.
And this guy's great, and Calvin's great. We work together all the time. So this is not just something we do once in a while. We do this all the time. We're on WhatsApp. We're always exchanging great teams and great people. So these guys are great. So
thank you so much.
Try to find a way to work with them.
Thank you for your mentorship.